Okay, I'd like to call to order the Legislative Committee of the Pittsylvania County Board of Supervisors, 4 p.m., Thursday, March the 7th, 2019, in the main conference room of the County Administration Building, Chatham, Virginia. Roll call, Ms. McCluster.
Mr. Farmer?
Here.
Mr. Scares?
Here.
Mr. Barber?
Here.
And I will also note that we have Mr. Blackstock, Mr. Warren, and Mr. Davis in attendance.
Okay, thank you. Does any of our committee or staff have any revisions or additions to make to the agenda as presented? Seeing none, can I get a motion for approval?
Make a motion to approve.
Second. Before we vote, I'd like to make one note that on item 6E, it's not listed here, but I have invited Mr. Ken Maltz to speak in regards to the farming definition. So, all in favor, please raise your right hand. It's unanimous. Before we get into 5A, I just want to make one quick announcement. We are up against the time clock here this afternoon at 5 p.m. We have a budget meeting, so to be respectful for that meeting and all the associates that are dealing with that, so please know that we have a 5 p.m. curfew on this meeting today. Item 5A, I'd like to introduce it and then let Mr. Hunt step in. It's discussion of potential mandatory septic pump out for lakefront property owner ordinance. I'm a member of TLAC, and during our January meeting, we were given two very well detailed presentations. One was from the Smith Mountain Lake Association, and one was from Leesville Lake Association. And during these presentations, the professionals just spoke very highly of how clean of waters we have here in these two lakes, especially Smith Mountain Lake. We're very blessed to have the resources and the studies and the professionals on board keeping these lakes as clean as they can be. But two of the supervisors from other localities spoke up about their ordinance, about how their counties have a septic, basically a pump out ordinance, just for an environmental friendly, try to do in their parts to keep the water as clean as possible. So I didn't speak up because I wasn't sure what Pittsylvania counties was. So after this meeting, I got in touch with Mr. Hunt, and he will inform us of what our ordinance maybe is or is not, along with some other localities. But just know, I'm not bringing this up saying we need to take action. I'm bringing this up just for this committee to understand what we may have in place, what we may not have in place.
Thank you, Mr. Farmer. If you turn to your packet, and there's extra packets at that empty chair right there if the audience wants to follow along. If you turn to 5A, the packet, my research has determined that of the organizations that make up TLAC, Pittsylvania County, Franklin County, Campbell County, and Bedford County, Campbell County has no pump out septic requirement ordinance. Pennsylvania County currently has no pump out requirement ordinance. Bedford County does have a pump out requirement where they require you to pump it out once every 5 years if you are a lakefront or a waterfront home, but they only apply it to short-term rentals. I guess this is geared towards the lake. That would be Airbnb or VRBO, and they define short-term rentals as any residence that's rented for a period of less than 30 consecutive days. Franklin County does have a full-blown septic tank pump out ordinance, and if you turn to the very front one that has 5A on it, if you turn to page 3 of this ordinance, that's where the meat of this is. It's section 17-8, and basically it says that if you live within 500 feet of the 795-foot contour of the Smith Mountain Lake basin, you have to pump out your septic tank once every 5 years. There are some exceptions to this rule. Those are found in C1 and C2. Those would be if a certified septic person determines that your tank is less than 1/3 full, or if you've been vacant from the house a net total of 36 consecutive months given during that 5-year period. This also requires that each person who fits geographically within this would have to register their septic tank at $35, and it would have to be policed. So, of the TLAC participants, really one has a full-blown ordinance, one only applies it, Bedford County only applies to short-term rentals, Campbell County has nothing, we have nothing. So I also have included in here with you Bedford's ordinance, a little blurb on Franklin County's pump-out thing, an email from Campbell County that says they don't have one, and then some information about pump-outs that TLAC has on their website. So staff is here to just listen to what the board wants to do or doesn't want to do. We're not seeking any action today. Mr. Farmer's just brought this up to bring it to your attention, to see what the pulse of the board is. We'll be happy to bring you something back in the future or not. This is just up for discussion by the Legislative Committee and any other additional board members who may be here.
Thank you, Mr. Hunt.
Yeah.
I'll open the floor if you have any questions, comments.
I have a comment.
Yes, sir.
Maybe, the exemptions you read there, the way a septic tank works is a septic tank rises enough to get to the level where it drains into the lines through a junction box. How would a septic tank that would have to be almost never in use to only hold 1/3 full of the tank itself? You'd never get that exemption unless nobody was using it.
Right. Well, I mean, you've exceeded my knowledge of septic tanks already, but I believe the solids remain in the bottom and the fluids rise up. But you're right.
What it is, it's a tank.
Right.
And it fills up and it gets to a hole up here and it drains into a junction box and goes into the lines that are normally filled with gravel, and it soaks into the ground.
Right.
Well, anybody that's using a septic system and takes a few showers and all, the tank fills up. There's no way, unless the house was not being utilized, or the mobile home or whatever it is, that the tank wouldn't be full. Is that Franklin County?
That is Franklin County. That's on page, really the exceptions start on page 3 and 4 of this first one that says 5A on it.
Have we had any complaints at all about septic tanks leaking around the lake? Of course, we're on Lee's Landsmith now.
No, and really, and Mr. Sides, you might want to jump in. Really, the bailiwick, the jurisdiction about wells and septic, that's usually Virginia Department of Health situation. Isn't that correct, Mr. Sides?
Yes, that's who, if you're building a new home, that's who you deal with for permitting both your well and septic system. So it's not something that the county gets involved with the siting of.
Mr. Warren.
It did come up last year a couple of times that they tested the water, and there would be coal water in Smith Mountain, and that made it possible. Some of this was possible.
Yeah, and I know I was the only member there, but during the presentations, it's numerous factors that go into whether it's dirty water or clean water that they test. But that was one of the things they brought up as far as responsibilities that the localities would have, is to just make sure your waterfront properties are being monitored, maybe to prevent. This is a prevention mechanism to try to keep the water clean.
Personally, I don't see why we need to address it.
Okay. I'm fine with that.
Okay.
I mean, I just wanted to bring
Well,
it
you
to
did
light.
the right thing. You brought this to attention. I guess if we get numerous complaints in the future, we could
We have
bring this
something to
back.
look at. That's
Okay.
right.
All right. Well, thank you.
Okay. Moving forward, item 6A, Fire and Rescue Ordinance Report.
Yes. Although Mr. Scarce has some information to share about this item, I'd like Mr. Slimp, our Director of Public Safety, to just briefly inform and educate the Legislative Committee and the Board about where we stand in the grand scheme of our new fire and rescue ordinance that he's been working very hard.
Thank you. We met last month with the ad hoc committee, and we're at a point where I think the majority of the ordinance is pretty good to go with a lot of the departments and some of the folks on the committee. And the only point of contention, I guess, at the last point we're still hammering out and working out, is to make up the fact of the commission, how that commission would be made up. We're at now 11-person commission. We divided the county into quadrants, and there'll be a fire and rescue representative from each quadrant, four quadrants, and along with the citizen from each quadrant, one person from law enforcement and one person from the standalone rescue squad, which we have today. We have 4. In the very near future, we'll only have 3 after the merger of Gretna Fire and Gretna Rescue Squad. And then we have a board member on there as well. One of the things we were hammering out last time was how the commission gets appointed. Fire rescue folks want to have some say-so or some input on who gets appointed to that to represent them. I don't think that's a bad idea. And they want some input on, the citizens as well. But I think some of the feedback from some of the staff too is potentially we've got too big of a commission. Maybe we need to cut that down. There's pros and cons to both those things. So that's kind of where we're at right now. Everything else, I think, with probably 80% of it's the most important.
And your intention is to hopefully get a new ordinance adopted by when?
I'd like to get it by coincide with the new budget year.
So by July, maybe the month before, you'd like to bring to the board for
Yeah,
adoption?
where we're at right now is just hammering out these last few issues, and they want to, the Fire and Rescue Association would like to take it back for the association and get some input, and maybe get a vote on it with them, and then bring it back. And I think the proper way would probably bring it back to the Fire and Rescue Policy Committee and our legislative for a joint meeting of those two folks. The board to
So,
see what they want or make any recommendations or changes.
It appears to be one of the few sticking points is how to compose this commission. If you could look at 6A in your packet, that's the proposed language on the first page, and the second page is just kind of a bullet point flow chart to how those 11 are made up. And I believe that Mr. Scarce is working hard on this, and Mr. Slimp is just kind of looking for some direction, because we do have a consultant who's helping us for free on this from Lynchburg. He's looking for some direction about what's the board's reaction to 11 members, and do you want to make it, are you okay with 11, or do you want to make it fewer, a little easier to handle? If that's the case, Mr. Slimp needs to bring this back to the consultant and to the ad hoc committee to get to finalize and hammer this thing out, because this appears to be one of the lone sticking points of this
Yeah,
ordinance.
that's pretty much everything else we've got hashed out.
Okay, so we've made a lot of progress. We're near the end. One thing that they're asking us to do is to give feedback on this voting member association. So, Ron, do you have anything to add or comments?
Hey, Mr. Chair, I just would like to say, I think getting it knocked down to 9 would be so much more manageable. Guys on the ad hoc committee have done a great job. We've been working great together on trying to get these issues resolved, and I think if we can give them that input, that we'd like to see that happen. I think we can easily, if you agree about midway into this, I think one member shall represent the EMS only volunteer department and one member from law enforcement agency. I think those 2 positions could easily be dropped. And I don't know if we want to, as far as our civilian appointees, I don't know if we want to make sure we focus that's appointed by the board itself. I know the Fire and Rescue kind of want to have their fingers in that as well, but I think this is more of a oversight for the county, and I think we need to make sure that those appointees are coming from the board as well. So I don't know if we can give that. Do you need a motion for that feedback, or do you just want to say that's a consensus of our committee? I don't know how we're going to move forward on that.
All right, so Mr. Scarce is saying there's potentially dropping it to 9. And that would be eliminating the EMS only volunteer as well as the law enforcement, is his suggestion. Does any other committee members or supervisors like to weigh in on that?
I'll weigh in. I think that 11 does seem to be an awful large number. 9 seems to make sense. If you've got a combination of fire and EMS working together, we're down to only 3 EMS supports. That makes sense to me too. So 9 seems a lot more manageable for me to get to a conclusion.
Okay,
my 2 cents.
I tend to agree with Ron on if we had to downsize it. I do like those 2 maybe being the ones. So that could be one item. Another item was mentioned about how the citizens are getting appointed. Is that something you guys would like to discuss this afternoon, as far as letting it be up to the board of supervisors, or letting it be more involved in the fire and rescue agents to make these appointees? Mr. Warren.
Can I get clarity on that from Ron? Is that, you're saying that not the fire and rescue representatives, but the citizens, correct, would all be the only ones appointed by the board? The rest of them would be appointed, recommended from the fire and rescue committee?
Recommended, I think the board still has to make the appointment.
Yeah, I think the issue is, the board appoints everybody.
Right.
Chris, and you jump in here, because you live in the trenches of this. There has been some talk by the ad hoc committee that the board would only be able to select from the slate of citizens that the commission proffers to the board of supervisors. So, I think the board probably should have autonomy to take their suggestions, and they're probably good suggestions, but I'm not sure you want to be hamstrung that you can only select from this slate.
I think it's just like appointing any other commission you do.
Well, and it's worked good, very good for our fire and rescue departments, because they have their group that actually does the fire and rescue response and all that. That's one group, and then they have a governing board that is made up a lot of times of business people and people within the community, and that may be passionate about fire and rescue, but not going out and doing the call and all.
Correct.
That seems to work good, so I would assume that would be the pool, or some of the pool that they'd be drawing from. So that makes sense to me.
But we would word it to where we're not limited to only that pool.
Correct.
I'm in favor of that. Any other comments or questions? All right, Mr. Hunt, do we need to?
No, Chris, do you have direction of how to proceed from here?
I think what I'm going to do is go back and talk to the ad hoc committee. I'll get them back together one more time, because I'd like to hash it out in that small group before the fire and rescue group. And our mediator is going to come back and do that with the fire rescue group too. And then I think he may even present to you guys when it comes time.
The way protocol usually comes from the legislative committee, would it help you if they made a formal recommendation to the legislative committee, next Tuesday the board could either vote yes or no on the thing, and then you would have a formal recommendation?
That's fine, or even recommendations from the legislative, because it's got to go through here before it goes anywhere.
Mr. Farmer, it's probably best for us to get a vote, a second, and discussion to knock it to 9, remove those 2 that Mr. Scare suggested, and then state that they will consider the slate proper to them, but they're not going to be only limited to selecting those people suggested, the citizen appointees.
All right, so what we're going to do is take action to recommend this up to the full board. No action other than that we take at this moment.
Right.
Does anyone have a motion that they'd like to entertain?
Chairman, I'll make that motion that we drop the commissions to be comprised of 9 members as opposed to 11, and drop the 1 member from the EMS volunteer department and the member from the law enforcement agency, and also that the board in making selections for the citizen appointees are not restricted in any manner.
Do you have a second?
Second.
All in favor, raise your right hand. Yes, I'm sorry.
I think we're heading the right direction. I don't like the idea of a committee nominating the members of the committee. That just don't sound transparency. That don't sound.
Well, I think it's not so much that committee, it's the fire rescue community being able to
I still don't think that's a good idea for them to recommend the members they want on their committee. That could get ugly quick.
Yes.
I think the board needs to maybe choose from a pool, but I don't think they should.
And I agree with you, Dave, too. And when we were talking about this before, I was like, I have no problem with you guys saying, hey, here's 3 good candidates.
Right.
Because what we don't want is somebody being nominated on there, and we've had this happen when we did the ad hoc committee. We had some people say, hey, we want to be on there. The people we never really see on the calls or doing the work. So, that we really want the folks that are in the trenches out here with us, making some of those decisions. Because there are some folks that say, yeah, we want to do this, but when where the rubber hits the road, we don't see it. So that's, we kind of need that. So, but I think for them to come in with this saying, hey, here's 3 good candidates. But I've told them, at the end of the day, it's gonna be up to the board of supervisors to make these appointments. That's just the way, that's the only way we're gonna do it.
Okay. All in favor, raise your right hand. Unanimous.
Well, thank you. Chris, you got what you need?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn.
Appreciate it.
Item 6B, Animal Nuisance Ordinance Update.
Ms. Farmer, I'll jump in here. As you know, we've been working on this for at least 2 meetings. What the update is about is that since we last met, the farm community has approached us, and I think you've gotten some emails from some of the farm community and Mr. Angier, and there were some concerns raised. They think we're almost there, but we need to massage it and protect farm community a little bit better. This is scheduled for a public hearing on Tuesday. So I know Mr. Scarce and Mr. Smitherman went to a meeting with the farm community yesterday afternoon. Their primary concerns, and I'll let them speak, is that this will be used to potentially go after agriculture for smells and nuisance type of things. But we just need, I believe that with 1 or 2 more meetings with the farm community, we can massage this and get everybody singing from the same choir sheet. So I'm just seeking some direction from the board. We do have a public hearing scheduled. We really have 2 options. Legally, you could just remove that from the agenda on Tuesday night, and we can inform people. We can put a sign up. We can put it on Facebook. We can put it on our website. We can do an email blast that says, you know, we're not at a place to vote on this. Or you could have it on Tuesday night, table it, and direct staff to go back to the farming community and get this thing right. I'll be happy to do whatever you want to do, but just know that I think in its current form, and this is contained in 6B, there's a couple changes that they want, and Mr. Scarce and Mr. Smithen can maybe elaborate, or maybe they don't have to, but what's the board's pleasure about? I think this is a worthwhile ordinance. I think we can tweak it to make it better and make everybody satisfied with it.
All right, floor is open, Mr. Scarce.
Yeah, I just want to say, they made a great suggestion. The issue we're having in the past is when an animal control officer brings a case before the court, they've always been thrown out. So we have the existing code that talks about all about the vicious dogs and things, and I think their suggestion, in which I agree with, is if we maybe have Aiden get with the judges and figure out what do we need to do as far as wording to get some teeth into the code, and we'll let these cases go forward. So I think that's the first option. Now, there were only 2 or 3 issues that they felt needed to be deleted from this proposed code wording, and I agreed with that as well. But the big thing for me is we're going to be spinning our wheels if we do this and it doesn't satisfy the judges and letting us go forward with these cases. We're going to waste our time. So I think I kind of want to take this off the agenda and then have Aiden get with the judges and get with Brian Haskins to figure out the wording we definitely need that will let us get these cases moving forward, and then we can proceed on after that.
Any other questions or comments? I would be in favor of keeping the public hearing. I think we're going to need to and want to hear what the citizens need to say, but I don't think we need to take action. I think we could table the action part of the meeting. That's my opinion.
Well, I'll go either way. I don't know, depending on the number of changes we make, though, I don't know if we'll have to have another public hearing.
Well, more than likely, if you substantially change this, you're going to have another public hearing. But there is some benefit to hearing what people like and dislike.
Since we've already advertised it.
It's already a sunk expense. I mean, we've already paid the newspaper. It's a time commitment. Do you want to hear citizen input on something you know that you're not going to take action on? But I think it could be beneficial. But
I'll go either way.
Do you need any?
No, if you just want to stay the course, just know from the board's perspective, staff does not intend to recommend action on this on Tuesday night. We will have the executive summary written to reflect that. We're going to have to revise that. But just know that this is 90% there, and just a little work and diplomacy and wordsmithing, we can get this. I think everybody will be happy on that.
All right, thank you. Item 6C, inoperable vehicle ordinance revision. Mr. Side, you want to run with this, or Mr. Hunter?
We'll tag team, I'll get things started, I guess. Just to remind you that the board asked for us to look into potentially restricting the number, or making it more restricted in the number of inoperable motor vehicles that you can have in a residentially zoned district. So what you have in front of you tonight is our existing inoperable motor vehicle ordinance, and the changes are noted in red. And I'll just kind of skim through just to give you an idea of the suggested changes that we're proposing to meet y'all's requirements. What we did at the very beginning is just tighten up the language a little bit to specify that it's only outside of enclosed buildings or structures. That's to make it a little bit more in line with the state code. And we are specifically stating in Section A that one inoperable vehicle to be kept on residentially zoned property. And then we got the current 3 or fewer to be kept in all other zoning property. So we've always had no more than 3 in any zoning district. We're just saying if you'd like to be more restrictive in residential, it would just be 1. And even in that case, and in all cases, it would need to be, as you see in the eye, shielded or screened from view by covers or not visible from ground level from any exterior boundary line of such property. Paragraph 1B is existing language. It's always been in our ordinance to specify that we treat rural or agricultural properties differently, and we try to clarify that a little bit. If it's no more than less than 3 in industrial district or residential or whatever, then we're saying that more than 3 may be kept in rural properties, which is defined as not visible from the highway or any exterior boundary line of such property. And a rural property, for the purpose of this subsection, means property that is within an agricultural zoning district and outside of an approved subdivision. Again, that's long-standing language. We clarified it further to say property with more than 5 inoperable motor vehicles may be classified as an automobile graveyard or junkyard, except that this shall not apply to farm vehicles in agricultural districts. That's to clarify that before it implied that there was no limit in this rural property category on the number of vehicles, but by state code, if it's 5 or more, it is considered an automobile graveyard or junkyard, which is regulated differently through zoning. Other changes are just a few little minor wording changes here and there. In the page 2, we add a little bit of language just to clarify that the enforcement procedures that are available would be those that are outlined in the state code. So Mr. Hunt has also attached just the state code authority to restrict vehicles, and then the civil penalty section that again we referenced in the proposed order. So this is an option to limit in residentially zoned to one vehicle, and this is a starting point that we throw out to the committee. There is the potential to say that you can have no inoperable vehicles in a outside of an enclosed structure, but we throw this out and start the discussion.
Thank you. All right, floor is open for any questions or comments. I have one question on 1C. Being that it's in black, not in red, I'm assuming that means it's current code.
That's correct.
So it talks about the auto repair businesses shall not keep property for more than 60 continuous days.
That's correct.
That just stood out to me as I was reading it.
Yeah, that is to try to differentiate between a car repair shop versus what becomes a junkyard, automobile graveyard, where cars come and never leave. That is, like you say, that's existing language.
Okay.
And part of that's reference in state code that you have to have an exemption for a legally, properly operating vehicle service. Yeah.
Okay. All right, Mr.
When I saw this come up, do you know how many complaints we've had recently? Or why did this come up? That was a question I had when I saw it.
We deal with periodic complaints. I wouldn't say we've had a particular uptick. It's something that comes up from time to time. Ms. Hayes in the Community Development Office enforces this. And I'd say we have maybe 1 or 2 a month, and sometimes we have some persistent ones that are difficult to address.
Any other questions, comments? Mr. Blackstone?
I know the board has dealt with this issue before, at various times over the years. We've had more complaints than we've had in the past, or, you know, when we get into this, if we got just a couple of people that are bickering back and forth and it's brought it to a head, what's going on there? I'm not on this committee, but I mean, this is an issue that's going to create some problems countywide, especially in agricultural areas where you may have houses on residential.
I wouldn't say that there's more complaints. I think one of the concepts or ideas that was brought to the legislative committee is maybe we should be more restrictive in residential areas. And that was what we were asked as staff to bring back to you all. So it's not based on a blow up of a problem. It's just based on maybe you could take what we got and make it better. I think is the sentiment anyway.
Mr. Warren?
Maybe it's because of the district, but I've gotten quite a few calls on this. And what it ends up doing is, if you have that situation where there's multiple vehicles that continue to pile up, and they're not being screened, and you end up pitting citizen against citizen, and, for whatever reason, multiple comments I've had has been, there's been a lack of enforcement of even the ordinance. They call the sheriff's department, and he goes out and says, well, there's nothing I can do. That's kind of how it got started in London. Just a repetitive, not the same person, but repetitive within, in particular, subdivisions where there's a cluster of homes, more so than, hadn't really had any where they were out, in a residential home, in an agricultural piece. I haven't had any of those issues. It's been more in those cluster subdivisions.
All right, so this isn't the first time we've seen this. This is multiple times. I think we've directed staff to come back with recommendations, and they've done so. Does this committee care to move it up to a full board, or what is the thought of the committee members? If we take no action, I'm assuming it just goes back to current. Mr. Barber?
Just my take. I mean, if they're not covered, they're not enforcing the current ordinance, which is 3. They're supposed to be covered, is that correct?
That's right.
So,
Or
I mean,
screened.
if you go down to 1, they still ain't gonna cover, they're not screened, so I think it should be screened. Some boards back, we spent a lot of time on this issue, and that's what we come up with was 3, and I haven't had any complaints. Now, don't have to bother me, I haven't had a complaint 1 on this in my district. I mean, I know a lot of people inherit vehicles from family members, and they may want to fix them up when they may not never do it. I hate to see people have to be forced to get rid of vehicles if they're following the protocols just to keep them screened. And I agree with that, they should be screened out of view, but if they're not doing it at 3, they're probably not going to do it at 1. So I think that's the issue, is enforcement.
Well, you can go down Golf Club Road right now, and there's probably on that lower end, there's probably 4 that are not in compliance. And I think we need to remember, my understanding of all the ordinances like this, we don't do anything unless there's a complaint listed. It's not like we're going to start going out door to door doing this. But there's been multiple complaints for several years, in particular one that's listed on Mount Cross Road, and we're now finally, after multiple years, in the court system, and there's multiple vehicles that have been abandoned on that piece of property that are not in cover, unless you want to count the bamboo they allow to grow up around it as cover. So the county has not done a good job.
Would this, in your opinion, would this, in your opinion, help that, or is it more if we have an enforcement issue? That this is, you see it again. That's kind of like the dog nuisance thing. It's, well, we're hearing that they don't have enough jurisdiction to make a call here. Is it the same thing, Mr. Warren, or do you think it's just a lack?
Well, I think it would make sense to be consistent with the state ordinance. than to have too many consistencies, because our citizen can go to the state and read one set of ordinances and then come to ours and be non-compliant. I certainly don't want to do anything that's going to adversely affect our farming community and agriculture folks. And I would assume the one thing I did highlight, Greg, is in relationship to vehicles that are considered farm vehicles. And I would assume that if a truck is designated as farm use, and then that's still farm use, that's not a truck, correct?
That's correct.
So we're not, this would not go adversely affect the ag community.
It's structured in a way not to.
Actually, it's going to benefit them in some lights because it moves it from 3 to 5.
Potentially, yeah.
All right, do we need to make direction? Mr. Scares?
I just wanted to say, I've only had one issue with this, and it was a pretty big issue on Vandover Church Road, but there's probably 20 vehicles that were parked and visible, and in and around the church, it's out there as well. So it took some time to get it resolved, and I think we're going to run into the same problems with the court system. I think on that crossroads, the one issue we have with the property owner out there is taking forever to try to get this resolved through the court system. So to me, that's the biggest issue we're having, is trying to get these things through the court system. I guess I really don't have too much of a problem with this, but I would like to hear a little more from the citizens and people. I don't know how much this has been advertised. I would like to get a little more input from people to figure out if this is what we need to do personally.
And I'm good with that.
Okay.
I personally don't have a problem with it, because it actually helps the agriculture. Said, I don't want to reduce the 3 to 1, because in my opinion, if they don't like 3, they ain't like 1. Just my opinion. I don't think that's going to satisfy people that's got a problem with the neighbor, seriously.
Has there currently been a public hearing?
There has not been.
Is that something that we should
Well,
move
typically,
forward?
you have to have a recommendation.
Something you're
to have
presenting?
a-
We have to present something. But, you know, the board, there's expense to it, but the board could see what the citizens want, or we could try to use another less expensive means like social media, or, you know, push it out in one of your Friday talks or something, and solicit some information. But
Mr. Blackstone?
I understand Mr. Warren's concerns, and I think we all are aware that as our county grows, that we're not all just in rural areas. Certain districts are much more rural than other districts, and we have to work together to make something that's workable county-wide. But in listening today, it sounds like that we, the Board of Supervisors and county officials, have not been enforcing the law that's on the books now. And if we're not enforcing what we're doing now, we can write all the rules and regulations we want, but why are we not enforcing our current regulations?
Well, that does trouble me just a little bit. And,
It troubles me a lot.
I know that Ms. Hayes goes on, investigates a lot of complaints, and sends a lot of letters, and we've had a lot of cars moved. I can't say that it's 100% when you have, you know, if the people that don't think enough of the property to shield the car, they're not very responsive to the county. But I do want to indicate we have fixed a lot of problems over the years. I don't want that to go unrecognized.
All right, second time, Mr. Warren.
And I've said this many times already, but I want to repeat it. There has been a significant improvement in this, but you gotta realize this problem goes back multiple years, and a lot of what we're discussing that brings us to trying to clean it up is that it's gone on for multiple years. Ms. Hayes and Mr. Sides, I would say over the last 12 months in particular, have done a really good job in addressing these issues and getting them done more timely. So, I mean, and I don't have a big problem with staying with 3, other than the only thing is, let's just be consistent with the state code, and it doesn't appear that maybe we are not right now.
What is the state code on the mountain?
Yeah, I'm not sure about that.
But
I mean,
the-
the code part, the state code just says, gives us the authority to regulate the vehicle. So we're not.
So as
They
long
may
as
not
they
put a number on
consistent,
it.
so they see the same.
State code has no number there, it just gives you the ability.
It just gives us the authority to regulate. We could go 0, or we could go 3.
And I'm okay with 3, but, you know, we need to make sure they comply. Only if somebody complains. If the neighbors are happy, I don't see why we get involved.
Let's,
I've got a related comment.
Go ahead.
I mean, something to consider, and I know maybe it muddies the water, maybe give you something to consider, but in doing the research for this, it's noted that this section is in Chapter 9 of the county ordinance, not in the zoning ordinance. Chapter 9 is motor vehicles and traffic. And this is the ordinance that relates to sheriff's right to move vehicles in an accident, riding on a vehicle in an area not intended for passengers, vehicles blocking intersections, removal of or unlicensed vehicles. I mean, this all relates to vehicles and vehicle offenses. Should this be under the sheriff's department jurisdiction as a motor vehicle and traffic code, as opposed to a zoning code? And again, I have not talked to the sheriff. I'm sure he would not welcome his responsibility. But I think everybody would recognize that if the sheriff knocks on your door because of the car in front of the house, they would get a response. In fact, they did work with us on one in your area recently.
Mr. Chairman, I mean, personally, I think we'll just move on from this issue. Obviously, we're not getting that many complaints in enforcement. I think we all agree the enforcement is the thing.
that was me, my comment. We've talked about this numerous times now to where it's makes, in my opinion, awareness has been brought up. Let's not take action unless we see a major swing of complaints. And then if so, we, just like some other stuff, we've already put together some of the legwork, and we can take action at a later date. Mr. Blackstock, last
One
comment.
comment, Mr. Scares' comment about what I think it was Vandover Drive. There's 20 cars. Well, we go to 3 or 5 or whatever it is. If there's 20 cars out there that are an issue, then we need to get on top of it.
Yeah,
And we did get those.
we'll handle those individually, not in this setting. All right, moving on. 6D, grass and weed ordinance. Let's move quickly, guys.
All right, Mr. Hunt did the yeoman's work on this, but I'll just indicate that, you know, the legislative committee requested that we look into a grass and weed ordinance. This has come up before, and we have come up with some drafts in the past. Mr. Hunt kind of updated the situation and looked back at what other localities have done. So simply for your consideration, this is a standard and typical grass and weed ordinance. We can go through it line by line if you like, or you may ask questions. You may need to be directed to Mr. Hunt, but however you want to consider it. I'll call your attention to several places where it states that it's intended not to address farming, operations, but again, we just offer this based on the committee's request.
Okay. Mr. Barber.
Yes, sir, Mr. Farmer, I mean, I'll go ahead and throw my opinion out. I think we'll just leave this alone. I tell you what, it's too many issues. A lot of farmers cut hay on R1 property. I know that for a fact, because I got some I do. A lot of people's got horses in R1. Some people's even got cattle in R1. And VDOT is the worst problem we've got with weed ordinance in Pittsylvania County, because they wait so long to cut grass. It's 3 foot tall. I think it'd be unfair to enforce a grass ordinance when VDOT isn't keeping the right of ways clean in a timely fashion. I don't see where we need to address it. I know there's individual issues. I've had a couple of calls on this myself, but I don't think we should punish the whole county as a whole, and I don't see how we'd enforce it. I don't think we got the means to enforce it. I've had a lot of comments about that. People have heard about this. How are we going to enforce it?
I'm not on the committee, but here's the problem that we have with the weed ordinance, and I've talked at length with Baden about changing this. I would respectfully, as the board member, ask the legislative committee to table this and come back to it later. I agree with almost everything Mr. Barber just said, but I think we need to do something for our subdivisions that have covenants that are not enforceable unless they're civil suits. So we're pitting citizens to get any kind of response done in those subdivisions. Mr. Hunt believes that there's a possibility of coming back and only addressing those subdivisions that would be, cluster homes.
Yeah,
That would
sounds-
make a difference.
sounds reasonable.
And, our towns have the ability to have those ordinances and enforce them. This would just give a little more clarity to those subdivisions without pitting citizens against citizens for non-compliance to covenants, because we have zero ability to enforce any covenants. Now,
Anything else?
So I just respectfully ask that y'all defer it till later date.
Mr. Warren and I spoke today. I think we have a game plan going forward, and we won't
You can bring it back
We
up.
won't bring it back until it's right or you want it in the appropriate time.
All right, we have 14 minutes left. Last item is 6E, farming definition. Can you give the board an update on the state
Sure.
plan before we get into the weeds of this?
Sure. As you remember, we've talked about this in two previous meetings. The board expressed a desire to assist nurseries in our locality to potentially exempt them from the production side and the equipment used in the production side from personal real estate taxation. You directed staff to come back with some language. You directed staff to make our current code, which is on 6E, match the state code by 1 through 10, addressing those items verbatim, and then put a statement in there about protecting nurseries. Well, since we did this, it has come to staff's attention that Les Adams, has inserted language into a state bill, which is HB 2733, which was recently approved by both houses, and is currently sitting on the governor's desk for potential inaction. And if he signs it, which all indications are he will, it will become effective on July 1. That bill, if everybody turns to page 3 of this, that bill in section 8, it expressly gives Board of Supervisors the ability to exempt machinery used by nurseries as defined in blank for the production of horticultural projects. So essentially, language in the state code will do exactly what we were trying to do and protect, if you view it that way, nurseries from taxation. Our recommendation as staff is let's only address this once with one public hearing. Let's wait till after July 1 when this becomes legal and enforced in our state code. The Dillon Rules allows us to do this, and let's verbatim copy the state code, which would in turn protect nurseries.
Okay.
So our recommendation is let's just chill out on this till July 1. This new language will specifically protect the mosses and nurseries in our community, and let the board just adopt verbatim that new language in number 8 that Mr. Adams put into the bill that will become effective, we think, on or after July 1 this year.
Okay. I'll follow up, because you and I have been speaking
Sure.
closely. Before we let our speaker talk, any comments or questions regarding what you just heard from our committee or board members?
One quick question.
Mr. Blackstock.
We wait till July 1st, how will that affect them on current year taxes? Is that a problem?
Ms. Hammer, you want to address that?
We go by the date the law goes into effect, but for 19 days that we charge.
Is there anything a board can do, Dave, to keep that from happening?
Well, you could have, what do you think, Ms. Hammer? It gives you some direction on how to apply it, but right now you're applying with the laws, your interpretation of the law, which is
January 1st.
January
Tax
1st.
day.
I don't think we can retro this law, and nor do I think we should. I think that July 1 prospectively going forward, those be protected, but there's going to be... Right now, we can only adopt rules and regulations as supported by the Dillon's rule. Right now, this is not good law until July 1st, and after July 1st, we will revise our ordinance to verbatim track the state code and give, if the board so desires, the protection that some nurseries and other people are seeking.
Okay. All right, this time I'd like to introduce Mr. Ken Moss. His wife Sherry is with them. They're owners of Windy Acres Nursery. This is uncommon to allow citizens to come into this work session to speak. Typically, it's only for staff or other experts. However, they're within my district. Something they've been very passionate about is having this time, 9 minutes, not a second longer, 9 minutes to talk. And so at this time, I'd like for Mr. Moss to speak on the farming definition and your thoughts on that only, without any other.
Okay.
Other
Thank you.
mentions.
First of all, this is a monumental issue because it speaks to not just how it affects us, it affects the nursery industry, but it also speaks to protocols and how these kind of things are handled. So I'm going to speak to the facts, and then I'm going to make a suggestion on how to fix this. But I would like a show of hands of all those that are here in support of Windy Acres Nursery and the nursery industry. Okay. I thank all these folks for coming. They see it as an important issue. We see it as an important issue. And so I'm going to explain to you really about the county ordinance 6-3.1. All of this is in your packet handout, but they're also on the boards up here for those that don't have a handout. And what I need to point out is this is an area view of Windy Acres Nursery Incorporated here. It's on Cotton Patch Road. Dr. Wilford Cox is here. He owns the farm behind it. This, sir, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, is a farming operation. Okay? The issue surrounding whether or not our farm machinery is farm machinery results in the zoning, really. How are we zoned? We're zoned A1 Agricultural District Farming. That's in your handout, but it's also on this placard here on the floor. So if we were then a, quote, business, we would be zoned B1, which we're not. B1, so the way that the Virginia Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services deals with this issue is they issue two types of licenses. A Category 91 nursery operator, which we are, Lewis Nursery, Harris Nursery as represented here. And there's a Category 89, which is a nursery stock dealer. Okay? This language was input into the code, into Virginia Code 58.13505 last year and this year, both. Once it was addressing the definition of agricultural products, meaning nursery plants, horticultural plants are ag products. This year it was addressing what is a farm machine. And so what I'm trying to point out here is these are the top 20 Virginia commodities. The greenhouse industry is number 5. Tobacco is on here. All of these are exempt. This ordinance 6-3.1 applies to every one of these operations. And of course, there's a lot more operations than this in the Commonwealth. But we are singled out and not allowed the exemption of the existing code, which exempts all farm machinery and farm equipment. Now, for those of you that do not understand how the code works, Virginia code, this is a code that deals with taxation of farm machinery or other personal property for that matter, but what we're talking about is farm machinery. So it says farm machinery and farm implements are hereby, this is current code now, this is not the amended code. Farm machinery and farm implements are hereby defined as follows. And so you go to number 8 and it simply says farm machinery and farm implements. Okay? So where the dispute or the debate, which is not a debate at all, is that we're not a farm, we're a business. But in fact we are. Does that look like a Home Depot to anyone in this room? I'd say probably not. We are a farm. We produce ag products. We're one of the top 20. We're zoned agriculture A1 district. Okay? If we were a Home Depot, we would be zoned B1, and we would have a Category 89 license, which we do not. We have a Category 91 nursery operator. And so an operator is a producer. We produce and sell agricultural products. How we sell those products, retail, wholesale, is indifferent to that fact. So the point is, the governing body through 3505B, then, that's Pittsylvania County in this case, is allowed in the ordinance, which has been in effect on this subject since 1971. So our position is we have always been exempt since we started our operation in 1988. Lewis Nursery, which for those of you who don't know, it's a fantastic operation. It's 100 years old, I think. It's probably the oldest, one of the oldest in the state, and it's right here in Pittsylvania County. They deserve the same consideration. Harris Nursery, they're all Category 91 operators. We're not a Home Depot. We're not a Lowe's. We're not Haymore Garden Center. Those guys are all zoned B1, and they are, in fact, a Category 89 license holder. Now, the legislation, I agree with the recommendation. This is the amended legislation, okay? And so this is in your packet as well. What this does, when it talks about the definition of farm machinery and farm implements, we're not talking about the definition of a farm anymore. It makes mandatory that any nursery production equipment is farm equipment. Therefore, the existing county ordinance is sufficient to cover the new legislation. However, I agree to adopt it verbatim. There's no questions asked. The thing I need to point out, though, is of all of these others on the list here, other than grapes, which is wine production, it was already had already been dealt with. Because the state doesn't define farm machinery, nor does the county ordinance, if the commissioner of the revenue so chose, she could single any one of these out, any one of them, and say, you're not a farmer. We're in the same category as all the rest. We're zoned like all the rest. We are exactly the same as all the rest. We produce nursery plants. These other guys produce other products. They're all ag products. The existing county ordinance covers us now, and it always has covered us.
So we're also the only one that's not exempt in the county.
Right. All of these are exempt. Of course, we don't produce cotton lint here, but all of these commodities are exempt in the county. We're the only one that's not.
As in the other counties too.
Right. The other counties, Senator Ruff, his staff have done the research on this. And when he put forward legislation last year, he made the comment, there are 137 tax jurisdictions in the Commonwealth, and we're the only one, Pittsylvania, that looks at this situation for a Category 91 nursery operator and does not consider them to be a farming operation. Okay. So, you have any comments, Dave?
I do. I've heard farming and agriculture mentioned a number of times here. Most of y'all know me. I'm not going to take the time with that. But I'm a lifelong member of this county and of Fence Fire Patrol. I've heard farming mentioned. I've heard agriculture. We want to do this. We want to be kind to our farmers. But what's been happening to these folks is not kind. It's not even legal if you get right down to it. If you want to take one person or one entity that represents you guys in the county and give them the authority to twist the law around and treat them unfairly against everybody else in the county, it's not right. It's been going on a long time, and if it wasn't for the push that's been done in Richmond on their behalf, it probably wouldn't be happening now. These folks have doubled down, and they've determined they're going to do anything they can to run this thing in the ground and defeat this effort to get justice and honesty done for the county. And it's not right.
1 minute.
And you can't, you're the guy who has to do something about it.
Right. To that point right there, I understand this is not the proper venue for that, but since have been given limited venue, I'm asking the Board of Supervisors entertain a resolution to make this thing retro to 2014, so that this situation, dealing with our current situation with the Commissioner of the Revenue's Office, will go away. If you would simply adopt a resolution that a Category 91 nursery operation is a farming operation in Pittsylvania County, a simple resolution, retroactive to 2014, that's not changing the law, this whole situation with us will go away. We're going to be left with multiple levels of court if necessary, and need anyone get any ideas that we won't do that, because we will. Thank you.
Do we have any comments or matters from any committee members? If so, I'd like to adjourn the meeting at 4:59. Thank you.